Hello, everyone. 8 years ago, our team at WNS Denali began supporting Facebook's procurement operations team. Over that time, we've built a strong partnership focused on driving key outcomes required to achieve Facebook's growth objectives. And if you use Facebook, you know that they're very good at algorithms. What's an algorithm? It's a defined set of rules used to solve a problem. And we're here today to discuss the algorithm of Facebook's procurement success. It's my great pleasure today to introduce to you Ese Head of Global Procurement Operations Infrastructure at Facebook. Ese, it's great to be here with you today. Will you please tell the audience about your current role and responsibilities at Facebook?
Absolutely. Hi, Greg. Nice to be with you as well. Hi, everyone. Yes, so I do lead the infrastructure procurement operations team at Facebook. We are a mixed bag as a team. We definitely handle a lot of the direct procurement operations for data centers. My team's also broken down into managing telecom expense management, which is circuits and fiber that Facebook owns across the world. So billing and invoice processing for that as well. We're broken down for tooling as well. So any of the procurement processes need some sound tooling to pair with. And so the team also works on tooling enhancements. We obviously work with WNS Denali for run the business activities, as well as another small portion of my team handles internal training, part of our change management structure.
Wow, that's a lot. That's great. And I can imagine the massive scale at Facebook for all of that. That's awesome. But, you know, when I looked at your career background when we met, you know, I said, wow, this is a person who sort of came out of finance operations. And it's my understanding, you know, that your path to the role you have today was not very traditional. So can you tell us, how did you end up in this position, and what actions did you take as coming into something pretty new to you to prepare for success?
That's fair. Yeah, I think one of the first things I mentioned to you, Greg, when we met is that I'm a recovering finance professional. But yes, I've taken a lot of that skill set into this new world. So actually, my whole career has been kind of non-traditional in its approach, right? Early on, I realized what space I wanted to be in, which is operations specifically. I was good at finance, but it wasn't the thing that made me excited to go into work, right? So I knew that I wasn't going to be an accountant. I knew I was going to be an FP&A. Don't come to me for that, not at all. But my brain is tuned in a way to problem solve. So I knew my strength, and I understood that a lot of the skill sets that I've got from whether working at Google or OpenTable most recently were actually transferable, whether it's direct or indirect procurement. So that was one of the reasons, or why I felt comfortable moving from one industry to another. As well as about maybe 20 years ago, I had a mentor, and I'll never forget this, who reminded me that as you move from one career to another, one job to another, it is a quid pro quo. As in, you are bringing your bag of goods, your knowledge, right? And the business is supposed to give you something back, not just a paycheck, but actually something you can learn and then take on to your next career move, right? And so from Google, when it became online advertising, campaign, relationship management with the advertising agencies, pivoting that to OpenTable, that was really hospitality, technical because they create their own product. And then now to data center operations. So I've taken the direct, indirect procurement knowledge, order to cash knowledge that I have from each of those respective industries, and each time learn something new. So that's one thing I'll never forget, is that quid pro quo that one of my mentors really instilled in me, I think about 20 years ago.
That's great. You know, it's part of this is about mentors and the value of that as you change careers, right? And certainly in the industry you're in, there's a lot of fast-moving companies and a lot of opportunities for that. So I think you know, when we talked before too, you said you know, to go into a new role like that, where you're, you know, into a new domain, it's important to know your stakeholders and understand them. Can you speak to how you built relationships with your stakeholders?
Yes. Okay. So two things with them, right? So what's in it for them? In the world of procurement operations, I don't think it's very obvious the value proposition right off the bat, right? If you're not in this ecosystem. So you think
Sure.
about your other stakeholders, they just think you're maybe putting extra steps, maybe an extra barrier, when it's really called
Mm,
controls, risk mitigation. So understanding what really drives your stakeholders to be able to have them buy in or align with what you'd like to do. But that's also hard to do when you're moving from one industry to another, right? So how do you know? It's different. What might work on the online ad side versus, let's say, data center infrastructure.
sure.
So finding a mentor, or I would even say an ally who is well versed in that industry to complement that with them for the stakeholders, that's critical because they'll be able to enlighten or actually shine a beacon on an area that needs improvement that may not have been obvious for you due to the fact that you're not familiar with that industry.
Right, right. No, that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, we talk a lot about stakeholder relationships and how important that is as people really focus on a category strategy as well. So we know and we believe in the importance of those relationships and how valuable strong relationships can be in terms of helping them drive their business outcomes. That's awesome. So with this background that you had in finance and in operations, right, and even as a recovering financial person, right, what did you bring into this new role that helped you apply that experience to make some positive changes?
Yeah, that's a good one. And I think most of the time that is actually the scary part as a professional trying to pivot from one thing to another.
Sure.
Um, the expectation almost seems that you must have, if there are 5 criterias for this new role or industry, that you must have all 5. Now, I think it's like a pizza pie, right? If you have most of the pie, that's okay to have a few slices that don't fit. And so for my previous positions, I really took that to heart. I would really see what the requirements are, understand the knowledge or expertise that I had. It didn't always have to fit 100%. I would also say that's applicable to recruiting because I was recruited to this job here at Facebook, and the recruiter was intuitive enough to know, okay, this is
Mm-hmm.
the pie that I need. It does have data center experience. She does not have that. However, she does have managed service provider experience, BPOs. She does have managing large teams globally, onboarding tooling, managing stakeholders, internal and external, as well as the ability to scale a business. She does have experience scaling by structuring, let's say, we talked about the 4 desks, whether it's a black box model or a shared service model. So it was very good to actually have the recruiting team understand that you don't have to have every single piece of the pie. You can actually learn, right? So that goes back to the quid pro quo. So here I am bringing what I know to this business and hope to get back learning. And for this example would be data center operations.
That's great. Yes. So as you came in and sort of took things over, and you've been there about 2 years, I think, and
Yeah.
you've made some changes, and everybody knows how hard change can be, and there's a lot of talk about change management, and there's a lot of talk because it's real, right?
Yeah.
It's hard sometimes to make change, but it can be even harder in fast-moving, high-growth cultures like Facebook
Yeah.
and some of the other places that you've worked. So when you were making these changes and trying to drive, say, your agenda and procurement operations there, were there any challenges with making the changes that you did not anticipate? Like, what surprises did you find when you were trying to make some of these changes?
Yeah. The pace, which you touched on, the pace at which the business operates, fast moving, high growth. When
Yes.
you're that fast, that quick, it is hard to pause, take a look around, have periphery, assess, analyze, and then sprint forward. That is not something necessarily that was not the muscle that we had when I initially came into this. So what surprised me was, and I should have known, but what surprised me is that left hand needed to understand what the right hand was doing. Because Facebook is such a great place that lets you have the autonomy that when you see something, you can fix something. Sometimes it actually prohibits people from actually talking to each other. So step one was very basic. Step one was understanding who my stakeholders were. which is quite a large group, right? When you think about procurement operations for direct specifically. So understanding my key stakeholders, going back to understanding what is the thing that either is a pain point or that drives some friction. And then leverage again the mentorship to be able to make sure, because that's the other thing, right? I came 2 years ago. There were people here before me. Sometimes the business tries to fix things, but either the business is not ready or there are certain dependencies. So helping to understand what those dependencies are was critical as well. So that was the biggest thing. The pace. The left hand needed to know what the right hand was doing.
Right. And I guess trying to sync things up with those left and right hands.
Yeah.
And when you're moving that fast, right, it's just that much harder, right, to do it. You know, if it's a slow pace, slow handoff, that's easy, but not at the pace you guys are moving at in terms of the infrastructure build out that you've been doing over the years. So that's a big challenge. And I think, you know, for a lot of people in operations, right, people sort of look at it the way you said, right? Procurement operations can get in the way, but I think in this case, it's been super critical to help with the growth, right? To build out this infrastructure in advance of the growth and stay ahead of the curve there.
Absolutely.
You know, we know you've had good outcomes, kind of inside knowledge about that, right? Because we're working in partnership with you. But you know, what are some of the outcomes that you've seen from some of the changes that you've made?
Oh gosh, it's what I haven't heard, which is escalations, issues. Again, operations. You know, it's working well. Procurement operations.
Right.
When you have the least amount of noise, it's a weird indicator, right? Rarely do people tap you on the shoulder and say, "Yeah, that process was awesome, rocked it." But yeah, so that's actually the biggest thing, which means then the engagement with the stakeholders has been very positive, and that breeds with trust. It's all these weird things that they're like not actually tangible, but when you have trust, that actually does help in your change management, right? Then all of a sudden you come to the table. When you want to affect a change, because you have that record, that proven track record, your stakeholders are more likely to open up and listen. So yes, no, we've worked very well with your team, your company, in realigning how we run our business. That's effectively the black box model, having 4 different desks to support the volume requests. In turn, what we've done is reduce cycle times, increase quality, and like I said, we hear way less noise, almost no noise, knock on wood.
That's great. No, I can appreciate that. Coming out of operations early in my career, I know that you know, when things are running well, that's the best, because you're not hearing any of the hiccups that happen in the process, and there's always something going on. So it sounds like you've got things under great control there, and that's very admirable. So what a great story you told us, and thanks for sharing some of the experiences and perspectives that you've gained. And as we look to close out here a bit, what advice, you know, if I said, hey, you know, there's people coming into this profession, or people coming into new areas in this profession, making changes, it's really dynamic. Procurement's so different than it was 20 years ago. But what advice would you give to people out there in the audience today to help them increase procurement's impact on the key business outcomes in their organization?
I think that's a great question. And instantly I think about increasing your circle of influence, right? So one of the questions you posed initially was how was I able to assess really what wasn't working, what was working within Facebook? And I just reached out to people. Procurement operations really touches a lot of different departments, stakeholders. I would say communication's key. So go out there, understand what their pain points are. Remember that change management can be fun. You just have to be very explicit about what is in it for the end user. And also I would say, remember, quid pro quo your career, right? The beauty about procurement operations, whether it's direct or indirect, there are a lot of learnings that you can take from one industry to another.
Great. That's great advice, Ese. I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come with us today and spend time with us. I want to thank everybody out in the audience that came by for this fireside chat. It's been a great conversation. We really appreciate the relationship that we have with you and with Facebook. And I really look forward to doing great things in the future together. So thank you very much, Ese.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks, everyone.